Evening, it's 5:30, Tuesday, November 10th, calling the regular meeting to order for the Fargo Board of Education. Is there a motion for approval of the agenda?
I move approval of the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Robin. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, thank you, Brian. There's a motion for approval with a second. All in favor signify by saying yes.
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 Opposed? All right, motion passes. Recognition of audience. We don't have anyone that has signed up to speak with us this evening from the community, so we'll move on to staff reports. And the first item is a professional development report from Jodelle Tigan. Welcome. Yes, Jodelle.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay? It's okay? There are a couple of handouts in your packet. I'm not going to read them in detail, but just refer to them maybe a little bit in my report tonight about professional development. I think our area in professional development is no different than virtually everything else in the world right now, where we've had a pretty big or significant impact that COVID has caused, and we really are have rethought a lot of the approaches to learning, just like everybody else in our system, right? And so some of those things have been really positive, and honestly, again, I think we've learned some things that think, wow, I mean, this really works better, and probably will continue that way. So a couple of those changes that we made this year really were, we put everything online this summer, and I think with rare exception, almost everything. And that took two different forms. Sometimes that was a mix of like a blended learning model, so there'd be a mix of kind of asynchronous content that teachers would watch on their own and then attend a synchronous session, and just a variety of different things over the course of the summer. But even all of our curriculum writing, everything was done over Zoom. And really worked well, I think, and in some ways was more accessible to teachers that maybe wouldn't have been able to go in person. So I appreciate having been able to work with a team to really accomplish that, because I think we didn't, if I were to look back at the numbers, I don't think we would see a significant dip in our participation, despite all of the other craziness that was going on over the course of the summer. So those things were really good. One of the events that this was our second year only, we call it the Teaching and Learning Academy, and that we do the week before the contract begins, so before teachers are back. And we've done it that way just to really try to create a time where teachers can count on this is a time we'll have some professional development available. Might be for some new stuff that's coming that year. Might be just time with their course-alike team, but that they kind of can plan for it rather than having that be a moving target over the summer. And so last year we did that for 2 days, and this year we decided to expand it to 4 days, and we had over 362 participants, so doubled what we had done the year before, and just really had great participation, again, almost every session over Zoom. Of course, one of the other advantages of doing those things online is you can record them. And so we had some things like that too, where teachers couldn't be there at that time, but were able to watch the recording later. So those are all really good things that I think we're continuing to learn about. And one of your handouts is about our back to school, or it shows you an image of our back to school professional development. So it just is titled FPS Back to School PD. And it's just, this isn't in its entirety, but I want to just give you a picture of what that looked like. And so we talked a lot as a team about what we had originally planned to do the 3 days that teachers were back before kids started in class. And then we, like a lot of other plans, kind of ripped all that up and started over and said, okay, we're going to do this differently. We ended up having more days, of course, because you all were able to push that timeline back for students to start, and it was, I think most teachers would say, if they haven't already told you, it was super helpful. And so we knew it was going to be very difficult to get people together, well, impossible to get them physically together, but even over Zoom in a synchronous way in terms of schedules. And so instead, what we did is we put what we called essential learning for teachers in a format that was online in very much a personalized learning fashion. And so all of the topics that were on the list for their group, so there was a different one for K-2 teachers than high school teachers, for instance. Those were all things they had to complete before students started in school, but they had that whole time to really flex how they were going to do that. So that gave them a lot of autonomy in when they could meet with their own grade level teams and at their building and with parents. I think we did a lot of things just touching base with parents and doing some assessment before school started. So I know our teachers really appreciated having that time. And then they were able to, I think the other handout shows an image of a table that's a PD report. And so we were able to provide a report for principals so they could go in and spot check who on my team has got this done and who is still working on it. And they could help kind of sort through some of that. So that was just super helpful. And then on that same handout that has the report, above that are just some examples of the kinds of things that we've been able to include in some of our professional development that we've put online. So it's been exciting, and I think, like teachers, those of us who lead professional development have had to develop a new skill set for how to deliver it. And probably the most difficult part of that, and I'm sure teachers would say this too, is relationship building. And how do you do that online? And it is super challenging. There are just some things you can't do as well online, and yet there's lots of stuff you can do even better. And so I think we're just kind of trying to find the right mix of those two things. So that probably brings us up to date with PD. I thought I'd just take another few seconds to just share some thoughts around kind of some longer term stuff as we look forward. So one of the things that at least I believe is probably the most challenging in terms of professional development is trying to stick with something long enough to be able to implement it. And so, in education, or whenever you're working with people, probably, we're not building widgets, right? And so as you are learning something new, you're going to try that out, and then you're going to reflect on that, and you're going to try it out again. And those kinds of changes that you're making in your classroom can take years. And yet there's always something more to learn, right? So as educators, we want to fix things, and our students have a lot of things that we want to learn more about, so how we can help them. And all of that just really takes a lot of time. And so as we look across the system, and in fact, Missy and I were just talking about this, how do we really grab onto the really big rocks and hold onto them long enough so we can implement them with fidelity and see the impact of that? And I think that's always been our challenge, and it continues to be, and probably more so today than even 10 years ago. And so that's one of the things that, as I reflect on comments, I think PD sometimes gets a bad rap. I see that in teacher negotiations and other conversations with teachers where they're kind of frustrated about it. And in general, I don't think it's the PD. I think it is I just really want to make sure this is worth the time because I want to see the results, right? And so that continues to be challenging for us. And one of the things I guess I really appreciate about what our cabinet has done is they really are having good conversations about aligning our school improvement efforts across the board. And we're doing that more today than we probably ever have been. So I appreciate that very much because it really supports that idea of learning deeply and being able to apply the learning. So just a couple other quick things to mention, then I'll take questions. So in the future, a couple of things that are coming down the pike. One, we're going to continue with this personalized learning kind of model, and I think certainly team-based learning, when our teachers can learn together in their course-alike teams or their PLC teams, that's probably their best learning from each other, and studying together, reflecting together. So we'll continue that. And then we are looking to purchase a learning management system to support some of this because we have done a lot of things with Google and other systems that we have available to us, but I think we're really looking to have that be more sustainable over time. And then as part of that, getting to the implementation piece, there's the learning, right? I'm going to take the class or I'm going to go to the workshop, but then there's the application part. And we're really looking at trying to support a model where a teacher can do the learning, but then also get to the implementation piece and be badged, if you will. I don't know if that's where we'll land on the name, but the idea that I actually am showing evidence of my learning, and so really modeling the same practice we'd like to see in the classroom, but through the notion of, what evidence would I show that I learned this and I'm applying it now. So that's it. Do you have any questions?
Lots of great information. Thank you. David, you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Jodelle, this year with all of the, I call it stay-at-home learning that occurred, there were a lot of new things that the kids had to learn, Seesaw, and I don't even know them all. How were the kids? I've heard various stories about how well the kids were taught how to use all these new models and techniques. Could you explain a little bit in your I'm sure that happened in professional development.
Yeah, so, and there, when the students were, last spring, of course, that was a whole different story than now this fall, when we tried to be really intentional about the tools that teachers were using more systemically. So Seesaw is a great example, where that was something some teachers had used for a while and were really familiar with and had used in their classroom. So students in their classroom, families were familiar. And then in other cases, it was brand new to them when they came back this fall. And so our teachers did, one of the required modules was Seesaw for teachers to learn how to do that, because we asked that everybody use that as a communication tool in our elementary schools. And then for the first weeks of school, to build in that application as part of their routines and procedures, even in the hybrid. And so students in class would start to learn to use that tool so that when they did go home, they'd be more familiar with it. But there's a learning curve, right, to do that, and so that wouldn't have been the first day they were home in the hybrid setting knowing how to do that well. We also did have our library teams create some videos that are on our website for families also to learn how to use some of those tools if they needed support when their student was learning as well. But that really was the hope, is that our teachers would use them in class so that that learning would extend to home.
Go ahead, David.
Now, as part of this,
So I think the distribution is in K2, all of our students have iPads that they take between school and home. And then in grades 3 to 5, they have Chromebooks.
that was paid through part of a COVID grant, correct?
Correct.
Will they have those from now on? They'll continue to have them?
They will. That was one of the pieces, that was one of the biggest challenges, because as you know, and we'll talk about later today too, with a lot of the COVID grants that we've gotten, sustainability becomes an issue. However, we as a district did feel that that investment in technology and continuing with that glass paper project all the way down to kindergarten was something that was important. So Bill and his team have worked tremendously hard to make sure that we can continue that even during non-COVID times.
And then because they are now our property, the grant doesn't mean that we have to give them back or pay for them when this catastrophe finally ends?
Correct. We purchased the iPads and the Chromebooks, so they are our property. But then, when you make an investment in technology of that nature, you're also investing in the maintenance and the recycle schedule that you're going to use. So there's a lot to it. So kudos again to our IT team. I think year after year they continue to work with their budget and stretch as far as they can. But we just felt that was an investment that was important to us as a district.
Anyone else have questions? Nikki?
I don't have a question, but Jodelle, I do want to thank you. This was a great presentation, and I am encouraged to hear in a year that everything else is wacky and off keel, that our teachers felt that they had options for additional education, and they're excited to implement them. That matters. It isn't just having the educational opportunity, but being able to utilize it as well. And I'm glad they had the time and the access to the right tools to be able to connect them. That's really important. So thank you. I really loved hearing that.
Anyone else? Robin?
Thank you as well, Jodelle. Just spinning off of what David said, I would be really interested to know about the obsolescence plan and the cycles for some of this technology. I know we've had them in the past. We put them off when we had budget issues, but what is the ideal obsolescence cycle? I don't need the answer now, but unless you have it. But I think that's important for future sustainability in our budgets.
Anyone else? Thank you very much for the presentation. Very good information. Okay, item B is a report regarding safety and emergency management from Mackenzie McCormick. Welcome.
Hi, how are you guys doing?
We're doing great. Thank you for asking.
My name is Mackenzie McCormick, for those of you who have not met me or maybe just don't remember me from last year's board presentation. I am the coordinator of safety and emergency management for the district and have been here a little over 2 years now. My position has kind of gotten moved around a little bit, so I started out under RUPOC, and since Blake Mikesell got hired for maintenance and operations, I was shifted underneath the maintenance branch, which has been a nice change. It's nice to have a little department, and I fit really well in there, and we can support each other pretty well in that department, so that's been really nice. I currently have a temporary safety technician named David. He was hired through the CARES Act funding and is with us through June. He was hired because my job has turned very heavily into COVID, and I needed a little bit of help with my other tasks that my job entailed before COVID started. So I'm going to go through a few of the things that I've done in this last year since I last spoke to the board. Some of it is repetitive from last year and will be the same going forward with my job at Fargo Public Schools, and some of it is new, or some of it is a training push that I had in the last year, so I'll go through all of that with you. The first thing I'm going to talk about is our Stop the Bleed grant that we were awarded through the State Homeland Security Grant Program. Stop the Bleed is a national effort to encourage bystanders to become trained and empowered to help in a bleeding emergency. So my idea for this grant was the fact that last year's training push was the Run, Hide, Fight lockdown or active threat scenario. We also had Jesse Johner's Stop the Threat, Stop the Bleed initiative in Cass County. So I thought it was a really good time to play off of that and teach our building staff how they would respond in any sort of bleeding emergency, which could be an active threat, which could be in their personal lives, coming across a car accident, could happen in wood shop. There are a lot of different scenarios where things can turn dangerous in a matter of seconds. So we did receive $86,000 in change. We currently have used a little over $40,000, and that was used to purchase Stop the Bleed kits, which is pictured on the slide. And those are in every one of our red buckets, which are in classrooms or large group areas in the district. We also use that money to purchase training kits so that we can go forward and continue training our staff. And then the rest of the money I was hoping to use on staff training, so staff could be paid to come to professional development. Because COVID hit, that wiped out some of our training opportunities. So we did go through training with our lead custodians, we did go through training with our gym teachers, and a few other groups along the way, and we just kind of came to a halt because of COVID. We are looking into an extension in the dollars to see if we can go a little bit longer and see if we can get some more of that training in before the dollars expire. Since I last spoke to you guys, I did speak about the mutual aid agreements we have with our community partners, whether that be churches or local businesses near our schools. Those mutual aid agreements were enacted to help us in sheltering situations. So if there's a fire at a school and it's in the dead of winter, we don't want our kids and our staff standing outside in the cold. We would want them to shelter somewhere until we could get buses to them. So each school has these different partners, whether it be
one of our other schools close to them, or a church, or a business that we could house these students and staff at for a short period of time. That mutual aid agreement is mutual. So if that business or church or whatever it may be needs a short-term sheltering arrangement, we offer that as well. That came into play in January, I think it was, February, when Elam had their fire. So we did house the 111 residents at Eagles Elementary, and they were out of there by about 3 or 4 a.m. I can't quite remember, but we did have to wait for the state to find new long-term care facilities for each resident, and that's what took so long. But they were able to shelter in our building and stay warm and stay safe, which was the biggest thing. We had our yearly WSI audit, Workforce Safety and Insurance, which is conducted by North Dakota Workforce Safety and Insurance. There were no issues on our yearly audit. That's pretty typical. We usually have very good records with Workforce Safety and Insurance. Our audits are compiled very well, so there are no real red flags for WSI. We did decide to change a couple of our discount programs with WSI because we felt the programs that we were in were not benefiting us as much as some other programs would. So we did switch from the Safety Committee and Safe Lift Committee to Designated Medical Provider, Return to Work, and Slips, Trips, and Falls programs. So we are diligently working to kind of get those programs up and running better so that we can, in turn, help provide for our staff a little bit better. BERT training is the training that I decided to push this last year. BERT stands for Building Emergency Response Teams. So I decided to make that a training initiative this last year because I felt that our building emergency response teams were not as effective as they could be. So what I did for the training is each school had a training session with me. We went through the roles and responsibilities on the team. So things such as the incident commander, the liaison officer, the logistics coordinator, just different pieces of who those positions were and what their expectations are in an emergency. After the roles and responsibilities were addressed and everyone was familiar with their positions, I did go through a tabletop exercise with those individuals, and I brought forward a bunch of scenarios that all happened in one day. The staff thought this was the worst day ever. Turns out COVID then hit, so I don't think the days I presented them were worse than this. But it is a pretty fun situation, and it gets people talking. So that's always really fun to do, and it's a fun training for the staff to be involved with. Well, then COVID hit. So a big part of COVID responsibilities have been trying to find what supplies are going to work best for us. How are we acquiring the supplies? What funds? Where are we getting them from? Because for quite a while it was pretty hard to get a lot of these different supplies. So we did acquire our plexiglass from Rusco Window here in Fargo, which was really convenient, and it was nice to help out a local business as well. We put those in mainly high traffic areas such as the office, attendance desks, library book checkout areas, because those were areas where they would be coming into contact with more individuals, especially from outside the building. We acquired volunteers for our spring meal distribution. A lot of those were the paras or occasionally building teachers or principals. That went along. That is probably, not the greatest or most ideal option going forward, but we were able to make that work for the spring meal distribution, and the most important thing was we got the kids fed. We continue to find new PPE, and we continue to acquire different options for staff and try to keep up with the needs that we have and the requests from the students and staff of Fargo Public Schools. So every day there's something new where we didn't think of that, or maybe one thing isn't working well enough and we need to explore other options and try a different form of PPE. We currently are working to acquire more N95 respirators. We do have a fairly significant amount acquired, and I have set up N95 respirator fittings for Friday the 20th of November, December 4th, and December 11th, I think it is, so that any staff member that feels that they need or want an N95 can be fitted for one. The big task behind that is due to OSHA guidelines, we have to make sure that all staff are medically cleared. So we have coordinated with Fargo Cass Public Health to have a nurse there to medically clear these individuals based off of a medical questionnaire. From there, we are working with our newly hired health techs to help fit test people so we can get as many done as possible. We have fire inspections. That's a yearly thing for me. So our Fargo Fire Department will go through all of our buildings and figure out if everything is up to code. It's very common to have violations. Most of our, well, all of our violations are very minor. A lot of times it's things like extension cords, which extension cords are not supposed to be used as a permanent fixture. So removing those. Sometimes we have power strips plugged into each other, which they need to be plugged directly into the wall. Heaters being plugged into power strips, those need to be plugged directly into the wall as well. So when the fire department comes through and gives us those, we send out work orders to those buildings to make those corrections, and then we send the work order corrections into the fire department to let them know that those are all corrected. We have not had permits withheld from us ever. We have a very good working relationship with the fire department, so it's pretty straightforward on the fire inspection side of things. Contact tracing has become a very large part of my job, hence David. He's been a godsend. For contact tracing, I receive calls from Fargo Cass on every case we have students or staff within our buildings. From there, I will look up in our contact tracing hub to see if the building already knew about this student, and then I will look at their power school to see if the student was in school. After I figure those pieces out, I'll call the building principal and let them know that student or staff tested positive, if they were in the building or not while they were infectious. And if they were in the building while infectious, the principal will help me out and start pulling the seating charts and figure out who the close contacts are. And then we do have to relay that information back to Fargo Cass. So that is pretty time consuming, but it's been going fairly well for the most part. And that is my year in a review. I am open to any questions you may have.
Wow, that's a lot of information, isn't it? You're busy. Thank you so much for everything you do. Brian, first questions.
Not really a question, just thank you for all this that you have done in keeping our students safe. There's a lot of work here, and I do recognize it, and so thank you.
Nikki?
Thank you, Rebecca. And thank you, Mackenzie, for all of this. I echo Brian's thoughts. By the time we got done, I'm like, holy moly, she's got a lot on her plate. So bless your heart, and you're doing a great job. I do have a couple of quick questions, just for information's sake. The Stop the Bleed grant, since there are dollars still available there, you had mentioned trying to extend it. I'm wondering if they don't extend it, is it possible to continue that additional training via Zoom or get people spaced out like we do in a boardroom or something, just to try to utilize and get that training out there?
Yep, so we cannot do it over Zoom. I have looked into that. We could look at doing social distance training. I haven't looked too much into who would do the training. We can have law enforcement do it. Usually I partner up with one of the nurses from Essentia. She's been really good with helping us do training, but I wouldn't want to bother her at this time because of what's going on in the hospitals. Quite frankly, I just haven't had a whole lot of time to try to pull that training together, but it is definitely a goal to get more people trained. I think we will have some good luck in extending that. Our grant writer is looking into it.
Dr. Gandhi, you had a comment, or?
Sure, I think I just wanted to first say thank you to Mackenzie and then thank you to the board. When I I think in 2018, when I kind of started in my role, actually right after I was named superintendent, my predecessor in the previous cabinet, I think, had decided that this was kind of a position our district needed. And last year was the first year that we had McKinsey present to kind of say, this is a new department in our district and what they're doing. Clearly from this year on, you could see that I don't think the work ever stops, and I think that that's a testament to McKinsey, though she started her presentation saying that no longer being a direct report to me is a nice change, which I agree with. I think one would recognize that McKinsey works in a position that's around the clock on weekends all the time. So thank you for the board for seeing that need, because sometimes it's the behind the scenes work. But we need it all to kind of make sure that we can keep the operations of a school district going, and she just continues to excel at that. So thank you.
Tracy, you have your hand up?
Yeah, thank you. I will just extend on that by saying that McKinsey serves on our COVID-19 instructional plan committee, so she meets at 6:30 a.m. every 2 weeks with us, and her voice is very valuable. So we thank you so much for the work you do. She pretty much reports to us the district level data that's happening, and it blows my mind that sometimes she has to say, this data is from 10 a.m. Friday, and it's already dramatically changed. I worked all weekend, but this is what I have, and it's just continuing to come. So thank you for the work you're doing for our families.
Robin?
Mackenzie, our paths cross often with what you're doing. I really appreciate your professionalism. I would like to highlight that COVID has clearly taken over a lot of her time, but she still needs to maintain all of these other items that in her day-to-day job. And so an example of that, I will think of the Elam fire. We have to have all of those MOUs and safety agreements, and a fire is a pretty big emergency, but you need to have emergency plans in place if the electricity goes off, if the water mains are shut off. So you are also maintaining that bedrock consistent operations, and I'm so pleased that you have somebody to help you with that. But when you have, in childcare, we have to have emergency placement if some utilities are down. Does the school district have to do that in every building as well, and to what level? Is it water, is it electricity, is it gas leaks? Help me understand, do you need contingency plans for placement?
Yeah, we have those contingency plans, and that would be part of our MOU as well.
Yeah.
Anytime a building would become inhabitable, we would use those MOUs. We also do have our reunification plans in place. So those short-term sheltering agreements are just a tiny part of that reunification plan in general. If children would have to leave a building, we would bring them to one of our reunification sites, which are the 3 high schools, and keep them there until we can pair them back up with their parents or guardians.
Thank you, and this just underscores how important our community partnerships are with surrounding facilities, and maintaining those is really part of the function of the school district. So I don't know half of the work you do, but I really respect what you're doing.
Yes,
thank you.
We have really great community partners in Fargo, so that's been a big help.
Yeah.
David, go ahead.
Mackenzie, you referred to the fact that you do the COVID tracking and whatever. Do you have data with you as to how many positive cases we've had since the beginning of the year, and if they're trending up or down since there's more contact, and how many staff have been have tested positive?
Staff data is not under me, that would be under HR at the current moment, so that would be a question for Doug. I don't have my computer in front of me, so I can't look up how many positive cases there are, but yes, I do have that data in our hub tracking. Cases are trending up because the whole city is trending up. A lot of what I see is there are a lot of household close contacts.
Could you, if you don't have that data, could you send it to us?
Yeah.
Okay, I would like to see it.
Yep.
Thank you, and thanks for your work.
Yep, and we do send out data every Friday as well. We haven't included that cumulative total as of yet, but we are working to enhance our data collecting so that we can share out a lot more of that in-depth data we've been asked.
Dr. Gandhi?
And just announcement for, I guess, for David and for everyone else as well. Although, I think Dr. Newman alluded to this, the numbers change because sometimes we get cases after the fact, and then sometimes we get cases before that we weren't aware of at the time. But every Friday at 10 o'clock is the snapshot that we use. So on the Fargo Public Schools website, if you click on the COVID-19 webpage, we do have all of our data as of every Friday at 10 a.m. So we'll continue to update that. And then, as Mackenzie said, we're talking about looking at a dashboard that's even more interactive to be able to provide that too.
David, would that address your concern in terms of information that you're looking for? It sounds like what he's looking for is
Yeah,
is
I
there.
think that would, I still wouldn't bother me a bit if you sent me an email. Thank you.
One of the questions that I have is, because June will be here at some point, with David being in the position to provide you with assistance, and then that funding is available through June, correct? What if we continue to need additional support? Dr. Gandhi?
Along with all the other conversations we have around with the other COVID dollars that we're spending, that would be a budget conversation that we have when we get to that process. But as of right now, as most of you are aware, that with the limitations that we've had with a lot of the COVID grants, we've had to hire a lot of fixed terms positions because one of the biggest limitations, not limitations, but a requirement for any grant is that you can't supplant services that you already need. So they have to be specific to COVID. And so David, the position that she referenced, would be one of those positions as well. So if we recognize a need for additional work, that would come through the budget building process that goes through the board and the planning committee.
Thank you. Nikki?
Just a comment, not a question, but in regards to what David was talking about, or for anybody's benefit here, there is a website that DPI is a part of, and it's ndinsights.com. So if there are questions on schools and COVID cases, and if you want to look at Bismarck or Grand Forks or Fargo and see kind of how they compare, that ND Insights site is out there, and you just click on their COVID-19 piece and you can go and select and take a look into any of the districts based on the numbers that have been reported to the state.
Thank you, Nikki. What has the response been regarding the N95 respirators? Would you say that we've had a pretty large request?
I'm not sure. You know, a lot of the requests don't come directly to me. They come through FEA or come through Dr. Gandhi or our cabinet. But I have put up that sign-up sheet for any staff that do want them. We sent out an all-staff email about it, and it will go out in the journey as well. And as of right now, the 3 days that I have set up, when I checked earlier, we had about 30% of the slots filled. So we still have quite a bit of capability to take on more staff if they feel they need one.
Sure, thank you. Dr. Gandhi?
I was going to say the same thing. I think Mackenzie sent out the sign up on last Thursday, and then just because I geek out on all sorts of data, I counted out all the slots as of 2 days ago. I think we were at like 43 people that had signed up, staff members district-wide.
Great, thank you. Anyone have any other questions or comments? Well, thank you so much for helping to keep us moving along in a safe manner. Appreciate your work.
Thank you all.
You're welcome. And we're doing well because of the work that you do, in answer to your earlier question about how we're doing. Okay, the next item is a FEA report. I don't believe, oh, Kim is here. I'm glad you're here, Kim. Welcome.
You missed the COVID-19.
I did? Oh, gee, I did.
We could do Kim, though.
Oh, goodness. Are we okay with having Kim come up to the podium since she's so close? Yeah. Thank you, Kim. Welcome.
Short and sweet. A lot of great things to tell you about. We, with permission of Dr. Gandhi, are having Jeans Week for American Education Week, which is November 16th. And so our staff are going to be collecting donations to go to our senior scholarships. So feel free to stop into a school and donate, board members. And very exciting, we restarted the Educator of the Month Award for ESP staff and teachers. And I know my PR committee laughs at me, but it gives me huge joy because we send out to every person, whether they won or not, the comments that they received from their coworkers, and they're so grateful to have been nominated and hear those wonderful words and feel appreciated and said, you just made my day. And getting that from them really makes my day. So it's a very exciting, and we've got a local artist that is making them special mugs that are one of a kind each month, so they're different every month, and it's really exciting and fun. And we did just have 2 winners for October, and our ESP winner was Julie Eiler from Fargo North, and Beth Thompson was our teacher winner from Ben Franklin. So very fun, and the principals are nice enough to come with me and present and really show some appreciation to their staff. So it's been exciting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Robin has a question, okay?
So where do we donate for the scholarships that you said any of the high school?
They'll
Okay.
be right in the front office. They'll have a little jar to collect.
Okay, thank you.
So maybe Anne Marie can put one up in the district office for me.
There is one in the district office as well. Yep, there's one at the front desk that week, too.
Rupak?
That's what I was going to say. We have one at the DO too.
Anyone else have any questions for Kim now that she's here? Huh? Thanks so much for being here. All right, I think the reason I skipped over the COVID-19 Instructional Plan Committee report was because we talked about COVID so much during the Safety and Emergency Management report. Any rate, we'll go back to C now after we finished up with D. And Tracy, would you be willing to kick this off? Thank you.
Sure. I didn't really have a plan, but I just thought that I always take notes during our meetings, so I just thought it might be important for you guys. I was just going to provide you with a printed copy of what happens at our meetings every week, if that's useful to you. So I don't know if you want me to just read through this document, or Rupak might have a more formal report, but basically it feels like an eternity ago. It was only a week ago, but at our meeting we reviewed the county level and our district level data, as we always do. We looked at our staff leave data and our substitute fill rate. At that time, both were fairly stable, but maybe moving in the wrong direction, so definitely something we wanted to keep watching. And then that meeting was really dedicated to the administration presenting to us certain protocols and potential changes we could do within our buildings to bring kids back. And then we were presented with a timeline to return to in-person learning. This was a very tentative plan, and I think ultimately it would be a phased-in approach, which is what is being recommended from public health. So I wrote out the timeline here for you. Bringing high school age kids back is much more challenging. So we decided, or it was recommended, they continue in the hybrid fashion until January 19th, which is technically the start of the second semester. And then middle school, we talked about the progression listed there, bringing 6th graders back on November 30th, potentially 7th graders back 2 weeks later, December 14th, and then 8th graders back with that high school cohort on January 19th. And part of the reason for this is just allowing us to have a 2-week time period to really carefully follow the numbers and make sure that things aren't escalating too rapidly. It gives us an incubation period. And then the thought was to have elementary school kids return 5 days a week now, perhaps starting at that November 30th. I think, Rupak, you might talk about this a little bit, but that is maybe going to be a little more challenging than first thought, because due to the nature of quarantine and people being positive in our community, it's 8 to 10%, I think, at any given time of our students that age are potentially out of the building. So our teachers really need that time, that Friday, to do distance education and still communicate with those people on Fridays. So we didn't want to take that day away if those numbers were going to continue to be high. So that is probably to be continued. And then Missy Idness presented us with some of the issues and data around busing now that we have all the kids back. Just really stressing that, it's not a bus driver's responsibility or job to ensure mask wearing, and really trying to communicate to the families and children that it's considered their responsibility and a part of extension of their school day. And then the decision was made to have masks be worn at recess due to a multitude of factors, colder temperatures, and kids are just naturally within close proximity to one another more than 15 minutes. So that mask break was taken away. And then we talked about some tight and loose things that are working and maybe could use a little more help in our district. The plan at that time was to have Brenton, who's our state epidemiologist, and a public health nurse actually walk through the buildings and physically gather data and get an idea of what we could do better. And then our committee did vote to approve that above timeline. And I just thought I would add, there was multiple pleas from multiple members of the community, basically to the public, just asking them to please do the mitigation strategies we're asking. Please do your part to lower our community rates, because that's really how we're going to keep children in schools.
Thank you, Tracy. Rupak, would you like to chime in, and then we could ask questions after that?
Sure. I'll just kind of fill in some of the gaps, and thank you, Dr. Newman, or some updates. Yeah, we are working with Fargo Cass Public Health, both Brenton Esmeyer, who's the state epidemiologist from the North Dakota Department of Health representing Fargo Cass Public Health, and Nancy Leith from Fargo Cass. We are walking at least one elementary, one middle school, and one high school building so they can see school in action and see what mitigation strategies work, or where there might be areas for opportunities as well. I know they've already walked the elementary building. I'm not sure where they are with the middle school or high school buildings as well, but I think that's going to be very valuable, and I know that they would, at least with the elementary school that they walked, they were very pleased with the mitigation strategies that we have in place and what we're seeing. You know, I think one of the things that we continue to struggle with is we have, based on at least just the data so far, where we haven't seen spread within our schools, we do feel that schools are a safe place, or at least that's the guidance that we're being given right now. However, the community rate is spiking so much that it is starting to significantly impact our student absenteeism and then our staff rate as well. Last week was the first time where we were upwards of 33% of unfilled sub-teacher rates. And we are doing everything that we can to find subs. We, in the last 2 weeks, and at least 3 different buildings have been on the verge of having to transition to distance learning for a classroom, if not a building, because of the sub shortages. And we were in a situation where, fortunately, we had a colleague principal said, I have a family member that might be able to sub and figure out a couple of days, and that's how we were able to make it work. So this is my plea to the community. If anyone does have the ability to substitute, we do need that. And, you know, now we are really, the pendulum changes every single day, and that's, you know, Dr. Newman talked about that. That's what happens with data and science. So we started the school year not knowing the correlation between the community transition rate and the spread in schools. And with the data set that we've had so far, we're starting to see that, okay, there's no spread in schools, and schools could be safer for our students and staff, and that's the guidance we're being given. However, now we have to consider potentially going distance learning because of the staffing shortages. And that in itself seems counterproductive, because when we have staff and students that are home, we know that they can be in schools because they're safer in schools and there's no spread there, but we don't have the ability to operate. So that's going to be something that we need to consider looking. So the committee at their next meeting on November 16th, just for consistency, said, we're going to make a determination on elementary school, and whatever the committee decides on November 16th, that will hold true at least until January 19th, so we can be consistent for the rest of the semester. At this rate, my recommendation to the committee would be that we stay at 4 days, because when you have multiple hundreds elementary students that are absent because of quarantine or isolation, they have no way to interact with their teachers or get that work without that distance learning days. These are the group of students that are outside of the 740 students we already have in our virtual academy. We are continuing to expand our virtual academy options as well. We actually have, I think, 6 different versions now, because we have a Virtual Academy 1 and a Virtual Academy 2 at almost all of our levels, or an iteration thereof. So that is something that we need to consider as well. I say all that because we live in a world of unknown with COVID. We're continuing to look at the data. We're going to continue to adapt. And one of the things that hasn't happened and continues to remain a big unknown is an extended holiday like we're about to approach with Thanksgiving. And I really want the committee to know that in Fargo Public Schools, we're committed to the best educational experience in a safe manner for all of our students and staff. And if that means trying to work towards in-person instruction, we absolutely will. But if the committee sees a significant spike because of outside exposures that happen during Thanksgiving or whatever, any extended holiday, then that may impact this timeline, because that's data that we can't ignore when we know that students are going to be coming back after the Christmas break as well. So that's my plea for everyone to follow the recommendations that we're getting from our city leaders, our public health leaders as well, to do their part to slow the spread. But it is now one of those things where the conversation has shifted, where we don't necessarily need to talk about whether schools are the safest or not, but now we need to talk about how do we continue or maintain the ability to operate with the staffing shortages that we have. So just a little update of where we are so far.
Thank you, Dr. Gandhi. And Tracy, Robin, and then David.
Okay, I will try to not share all my thoughts here, but I'm living this. I am doing contact tracing for my staff. It is miserable. The parents that are refusing to quarantine their children are very difficult. And I now know what our public health officials are up against. The names that I've been called and the accusations against me for identifying somebody that's a close contact, it's tough work and it's emotional work. So I empathize with those public health officials. I would say we have teachers at my position that have been quarantining since March, or isolating and have not left their house. The accusations of maybe teachers out in the public are heartbreaking to me. Going back to the teacher that I have had isolating since March, her husband is out in the community bringing back, and she's COVID. She is COVID positive by staying in her house since March. So it takes me a while for things to sink into my brain. Self-admittedly, but this is why we need to get the community health and mitigation efforts in place. We can only control what's in our sphere of control, but what the community does deeply affects what we do in our schools. It has more to do with schools are safe for kids, it has less to do with schools are safe for kids, but having the people there. We need our adults to step up, and if they value public education, we really need people to help us. We know that public education gives parents a place to have their kids, and this is secondary to education. I'm going to make the plea because I know that you guys are being diplomatically correct, but we need some help, community. It's not happening. The defiance on or complete denial of COVID is really hurting us, and that is what is preventing our kids from being in school. I'm sorry I'm lecturing here, but it's really frustrating to be pressured by parents to get our kids back in school, and those same parents are fighting mask mandates. So please open your hearts and your minds, and if you care about kids and our community and our economy, let's all pitch in. I know last week we were on the verge of closing some schools and some classrooms because of staff shortages. I don't think I'm oversharing, but we will be on call with classrooms being shut down, not just for a day, but for 2 weeks. So our community needs to be ready for that, because it's going to happen unless we control what's happening in our community. Sorry to sound preachy, but I'm learning the hard way. That's what's happening. So if our community values the kids, just like our kids valued our community in 2009 and helped with the sandbagging of our community, I think we owe that to our kids. I better stop because now I'm getting really preachy. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Robin. Tracy?
I didn't mean to go over you, David, sorry. I just wanted to, while you were going, I want to extend everything that you both just said to healthcare workers. I know I'm here tonight as a school board member, and I will try and stay in my lane, but everything that you have both said is so applicable to our hospitals and clinics right now. We have open beds, and we do have, quote, hospital capacity, but we don't have nurses or providers to care for them because of quarantine, and everything that you all have said about education is also applicable to our healthcare sector. So please, I will echo the plea as much as I can. Wear a mask, wash your hands, socially distance. Please do the things we're asking you for a few months of your life so we can all get back to the things that we love and the things that we want to do. So thank you.
David?
I don't think I'm going to be very popular. You know, we know the terrible problem we're having with substitutes, and I don't understand why there has never been any discussion about paying them more. We have this COVID money. I'm looking at the guidelines that Tracy handed out to us. Allowable uses, additional personnel-related expenses, support for recruitment of employees. Why don't we significantly raise the salaries that we're offering substitute teachers during this crisis? I just did a little bit of quick math here. My grandson just started a job at one of the fast food places. He's making $11.50 an hour. After a few months, he's going to be up to $14 an hour. They're paying nearly what we pay for in 8 hours. You could virtually make the same amount working in Taco Bell that you could being a Fargo substitute teacher. Let's pay them more. I'm getting so frustrated by this. I'm ready to make a motion and say, let's pay them this amount and see what happens. I can't believe it.
Dr. Gandhi?
Yeah, if Mr. Andring is available, I'm going to ask him to come to the podium and just talk about a lot of kind of what David just said, because that's definitely something that we have looked into. We've looked into pay, we've looked into increased benefits, we've looked into hiring individuals for long-term subbing as well, which does increase their pay in a sense as well. And then we continue to have these conversations with districts across the state. So even if we were to go up to the maximum pay level that you can for that position, right? Because after a certain point, then you're creating inequities within your own organization of a position and where it should be paid. There's just not bodies out there. But I'll let Doug talk to everything that we're looking at, trying to get substitutes, including some time this week spent on contracted service that provides substitutes, but the research that we found with the districts they work with.
So, is this on? I think this is on. Yeah, like Dr. Gandhi mentioned, we have looked at a contracted service to see if that would help us out. What we did find in researching with the other districts is they certainly do offer good services, but really the issue right now is finding the actual people to be able to do it. As far as pay, that is definitely something that we have discussed quite a bit. We do engage with some of our subs in any normal year in what we call a long-term contract, I guess is what I would call it. And that's where those subs are brought in. If somebody's going to be out, maybe it's maternity leave, maybe they have to be out, the teacher has to be out for any other reason, and we bring in that long-term sub instead of paying them the daily rate, and I think that's set at $112 for us right now for a full day. That long-term sub is paid on the teacher's salary schedule, and then they're entitled to some benefits such as health insurance and some prorated leave. So we do engage in those things. What we've done is really engage in that even more now using CARES Act dollars, where we know we're going to have subbing opportunities every day. Whether they're long-term or not, there's just going to be sub opportunities every day. So we have actually engaged, it's either 12 or 13 long-term subcontracts where those subs are paid on the teacher's salary schedule in that contract, and then they do have access to the health insurance and prorated leave benefits. So those are some of the things we have been working on. there might be opportunity for more long-term, I guess what I would say, contracted subs. What our issue is just simply finding those folks to actually engage in that right now. For different reasons, subs aren't maybe wanting to come into our building. A lot of our retired teachers really want to wait it out until COVID settles down or is a little bit over. So we have engaged in some of those things, like looking at a contracted service and long-term contracts where they do get more pay and the benefits.
Dr. Gandhi?
Additionally, I think another consideration for us is that using the dollars that we have received for COVID-19, we have also tried to maximize our own efficacy within subs to the level that we can. So specifically at our secondary buildings, where if you might have 3 teachers out and, for example, you would normally hire 3 subs for that situation, we are looking at a model where we're combining those classes into a larger space where the kids can be 6 feet apart, whether it's a gymnasium, an auditorium, they could do their distance learning, and we just have one teacher in there during their planning time that's willing to take that. Traditionally, that one teacher would get one overload for that one class. And then so we have that scaled up where because they're taking 3 classes, it's not 1-to-1 because of hybrid, the class sizes are half, but we're providing additional compensation that way as well. But then another conversation I had today with Kim and meeting with FEA is that even our own teachers, everyone has just so much going on. It's not that they don't want to, but it's hard to take on a planning, to give up your planning, to go do an overload for a sub. We have principals that are almost, reaching out every single day. And I was joking with the principal the other day. It's like the principal said, I don't even want to walk towards a teacher in my building because they think that they're going to ask me, can you give up your planning to sub? And that's just a situation that we're at right now. So those are all just some of the things that we are but we are looking at increasing pay in a sense or providing additional compensation to increase those sub opportunities to the level that we can. And it's just trying to find the bodies. And then another piece of that conversation is the ability to fingerprint. So when we do find someone that wants a sub, we want to make sure that there's no lag in fingerprinting. Well, we've had sporadic on and off with the company that we contract with for fingerprinting. Fortunately, we've also been able to work with Fargo PD that's provided some opportunities as well. But that is a requirement that they have to go through, and sometimes that lag has been inhibitive. But I know that there's some local legislators and other folks that are working with trying to help us out with that piece as well. So these are all just pieces of the puzzle that we're dealing with, trying to find bodies.
David?
I'm not ready to leave this yet. You said that you have to be careful that you don't create any inequities. COVID has created inequities, and this is a situation that we have to deal with now. And I'm just wondering, and I'm happy to know you're talking about it, but I think it's time for some action. And I'm wondering what would happen, for instance, if there were to be an ad in the Fargo Forum saying, Fargo Public Schools are now recruiting substitute teachers, beginning pay is $200. For further information, contact. I'd like to see if it's actually true that there's nobody out there. I think if you pay them enough, they'll come.
Dr. Gandhi?
Yeah, I'm not opposed. So I think what I would just ask Doug is, because I think what I heard you say, Doug, earlier is that the long-term contract piece that we're already offering brings the substitute level to a teacher contract equivalent. So I think if we were going to go and pay subs higher than we're paying our own teachers, that would be a violation of one of my ELs. So I would need that direction from the board.
Brian?
In Brown County in South Dakota, where I'm superintendent, we're in the same situation. We don't have staff. Principals having to do it, substitute at different spots. In Fairmont, the same thing. We don't have subs. We're short. One of the reasons that you wrote this plan of restart was if we end up in a situation where we don't have staff, well, guess what? We have to go to virtual then. And so to me, that's one of the reasons why we wrote this plan. And I'm not going to get in the weeds of what you guys have discussed in terms of salaries and monies where you're deciding where all these things go. I'm going to stay away from that because I wasn't privy to those discussions. I've trusted that you guys will follow this. But we did approve a plan that said that if we don't have staff for these students, then we're going to probably end up going virtual. And that'll be our solution. And so I'm comfortable with that. So again, to Tracy and Ryland's point here, as a community, if you don't start wearing these masks and social distance and washing your hands and doing these things, we're real close to going virtual here, the way I'm hearing it and listening.
David, did you have your hand up again?
Did.
Okay.
And I understand, Dr. Gandhi, what you said. With the long-term subs, you said they're paid on, according to the teacher contract. I believe starting salary right now is about $42,000, isn't it? I'm close. That's not the exact amount. 191 days. That breaks down to $220 a day. That's why I picked the arbitrary number of 200. We're under what a long-term sub would be getting or what a starting teacher would get. And this isn't going to continue into 2021 and 22 and 23 unless COVID never gives up. I mean, it's something that we have to do. And I understand about we're ready for virtual learning, but we've got the kids in school and it's working. Parents seem to be happier. My grandchildren are certainly happier being in school than they are in front of a computer. And I want to see a way that we can continue to fill those classrooms, and that means there's got to be a teacher in there.
Jennifer, you had your hand up?
David may have answered actually one of my questions, and that was in the salary band, what does that look like? What is that highest wage for both the daily rate and then as well as the contracted, so that we would have a better understanding of what that is and to stay under that threshold as to not compete with current contract. And so, I mean, I don't know if you want to expand on any of that, but I think David kind of answered that question for me.
If you have anything else to add, please go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, and they're put onto the salary schedule based on their credentials. So one of the things I know you mentioned, it seemed like ages ago now, but kind of unintentional advertising, but I had the privilege of actually talking to 3 different news agencies about our sub needs, where I was really able to promote out, if you're a parent, if you're looking for work, you have to have an interim sub license and you have to be credentialed to do so, or a regular teaching license, but please come and join us. Check out our website. Here's how we'll pay you. Here's how we'll pay you if you're in a long-term contract with us. So we have done a variety of different types of recruiting. We just posted kind of refreshed our post. We're looking for long-term subs. We had a couple of applicants. We're able to add, we originally had 10. Like I said, we're up to 12 or 13 right now. We can look at those efforts again and see. As long as we have the funding to do so. But again, we are kind of getting to that point where we're starting to run into really the people piece. Are there enough people out there that actually want to engage with us in this?
Dr. Gandhi?
And to Jennifer and David's question, I think we can get that. I don't have that with me right now, but I think we can get that to you. So we can get where the teacher salary schedule is, the sub, to give you that range. And then I would just say we'd have to consider that with all the other positions in our district too, right? Permanent positions versus sub positions, but get that breakdown by daily rate of pay. So if the board wants to take a look at that, then we absolutely can.
Robin?
So don't forget the subs can also be COVID positive. I think that's a piece. There was some legislation a couple sessions ago about allowing, and this was not popular with the union, about allowing hard-to-fill positions to be paid more than the salary schedule. Does that come into play here with subs? Are the subs included in our contract? I don't believe they are. Any thoughts on that? Honest answer, I don't have an answer to it. Honest question.
It hasn't come up in a discussion.
Okay.
Our subs really aren't covered under what our teacher's contract is how it's written out, so they wouldn't really fall under those types of provisions. But to be quite honest, I don't think we really have those types of conversations on maybe what we consider like a hazard pay or something like that, so.
Jennifer.
Doug, you mentioned credentialing for substitute teachers and licensure. Have there been any exceptions made or allowed for in North Dakota due to COVID?
ESPB still does require you'll either have to have an interim sub-license. Of course, we don't require it, but would prefer a regular teaching license. But those requirements do still stand if you're going to sub it.
Dr. Gandhi.
Additionally, even with our retired staff, there's restrictions on how many hours they can work per TFFR. Doug and I made a plea this year to the TFFR board to allow retired staff to go over their 700-hour threshold, so we can dip into that pool as well. The board did not take that action for a wide variety of reasons, which I understand as well. So, yeah, we're trying, but these are just some of the puzzle pieces.
Did anyone else have questions? Robin?
I want to add, it's not as easy as hiring a sub Tuesday and they can be to work on Wednesday. And I have personal experience with the background checks. CBCU is backed up. They don't want to admit it anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks. And so by the time they process those fingerprints, which are there to keep our kids safe, they're backed up just like everybody. So I want to ask for some grace. And it's one thing to hire them, it's another thing to get them through the process, especially if they're not certified teachers and paraeducators. So there's a lot of work that goes into getting the right people that are safe to be with our kids. So I thank you for all your work.
Anyone else? Jennifer?
So since we're on the topic of COVID, I'm not really sure who to direct this to, but I am curious, as I'm listening to positivity rates within our schools for both students and staff and looking at the numbers and the percentages, clearly there are more staff and students in quarantine than there are identified positive cases. And it sounds like, and correct me please if I'm incorrect, but out in the community, the highest transmission rates are happening amongst folks that are gathering and not having any mitigation strategies in place, so masks or distance, those such things, which we are implementing in our schools. So I'm looking for someone to help me understand why that isn't the safer place versus running, so basically being in our buildings instead of quarantining all of these individuals and the additional problems that keep escalating and adding up as a result, when we know that, I don't know what the percentage is, but when there are mitigation strategies in place, dramatic decline in terms of transmission rates. So if somebody could maybe provide some information on that, that would be great.
I'm thinking Dr. Gandhi and maybe Dr. Newman.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the challenge I said earlier that we're debating with. I think it comes down to one thing. I know Mackenzie just left, but I would have to go back to the data and lean on her to see where she's seeing most of our cases for our staff and our students. And she said that she's seeing them in household contacts. So it's not even always just out in the community gathering, but it's also a family member got it or a member of the household got it. And household contacts are very tough for us because the guidance for household contact can be up to, if not more than 24 days. Because if someone in your family gets it, you have to assume that they're transmittable their entire incubation period, which could be day 14, and then you're out for 24 days. And if that's where we're seeing the majority of our cases, that is a struggle. So that's one of the main reasons, biggest challenges that we're seeing.
Dr. Newman, and then Seth.
Just add on that it's frustrating because, where are those household contacts coming from? Well, they're coming from our community. So if we were to have to transition to distance or some form of hybrid, all of our businesses and restaurants and things are still open. So what are those kids and stuff going to do when they're not in school? That it just, to your point, it's probably one of the safest places they could be is in school. But we have to drive community numbers down in order to have staff, to have, go ahead.
So if I may elaborate on that, that's kind of where I was going with that. I'm trying to understand, instead of quarantining 150 teachers that may have been exposed but are not positive, we've implemented mitigation strategies. We have the ability to implement even more, additional shields, things like that, right? And so the likelihood, if they are positive, of transmitting it is very low, correct? And so I'm sort of in my mind thinking, well, to your point, everyone's going to work outside in these buildings, or, you know, in other arenas. And so I guess, you know, maybe that comes around really to the essential sort of worker conversation, which I don't know what the committee has talked about in terms of that. But when I think about the predicament that everyone is in because really of the escalating numbers of quarantine, is there another way to connect with the teachers that are either at home or in school with additional mitigation strategies, or with the students? And I know virtual isn't ideal, but right now the students are home quarantined with no contact then, correct? And so are there other things that we could be doing to try to connect for those 24 days or 28 days? I know there's several questions in that, so you pick.
Who is taking that? Dr. Gandhi?
I'll take the academic side of it. So I think there's a couple of pieces to your point. I think there is, because I think you're drawing the conclusion that a lot of people that are quarantined are not getting it. I don't know, and this is where I would have to rely on Fargo Cass Public Health or the doctor on our board, on whether if someone's a household contact, are they more likely to get it from their household contact or not? And then there's also a difference between getting it and being symptomatic or being an asymptomatic carrier, which is why we would be really cautious. And I would say, I think it would go against medical guidance to say do the essential worker designation that you referenced, because I think that brings household contacts into the school where you now do have students that are in person that can't social distance. And that person has been in a lot of transmittable moments as a household contact. So that piece I don't know. As it relates to the students that are out, there isn't anything else we can do besides stay 4 days a week, because you have teachers that are contractually working their full day, and then we have to give them their planning time and their prep time. They have some students that are out for 4 days, some students that are out for 14, some students that are out for 24 students. When a student goes out for a period of time, you can't just seamlessly integrate them into our virtual academies, not only because are they already full, but those are working completely independent, and that's the model, because you can't have two teachers necessarily, you can't guarantee that they're going to be on the same ELOs, or that's not, you can't just kind of transfer instruction from one day to the other for the kids. So that's why we need that 4 days a week. So at least on that Friday, the teachers have the ability to plan and connect with the students that are out. And that's the challenge. I mean, logistically, this is what we're trying to figure out, and that's kind of where we're struggling with.
Seth, you had your hand up.
I would like to say that I do agree with you on the 4 days a week thing. I think that's pretty important. I would like to also reiterate Robin's plea to the community, and I don't think you were being all that preachy. After listening for the past 10 minutes here with this discussion of trying to find subs and how much we're going to pay them and contact tracing, and anybody out there in the community that's watching this, you can see how complex and complicated these issues are, and then stop and think how simple it is literally to put this on and to stay home when you don't need to go out, and to help as a community for all of us so that we can get back to normal. And I just would like to reiterate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian?
Still going to go back to my point, though, and in our plan, restart plan, if we're at the point where we're going to have to go virtual, then I think we need to go virtual. But that's not my call. That's your guys' call. And I would question, if we're not going to go there, why did we write it? And I'm not trying to scare people. I'm just saying that we're there. We're darn close, aren't we?
I feel like we are, based on the conversation today. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if that ends up being a decision that the committee makes Monday for, if it's not entirely, for some of our some of our grades. And I sometimes wonder if, and then again, this isn't my decision to make or to throw out there, but having 1 day a week for the teachers to make contact with the students that aren't in school, is that enough time? Are we getting to the point where they need more time to make contact with the kids that aren't able to be in school? So is being in school for K through 5, 4 days a week, too much? So I'd just throw that out for the committee to consider. And I do believe that we have a plan that works. I do believe we have a plan that provides us with the flexibility, that provides the community and the instructional plan committee with the flexibility to make the decisions that it needs to make. And I support the plan still. I support the committee. I support the work that the committee is doing, the research that everyone is doing that serves on the committee and that brings that information to the table for those Monday morning discussions. I've been listening in on them. I'm aware of the conversations that are happening. And if we end up, I don't know where we go if we end up talking about, additional budget for looking at changing the levels of pay for staffing, if we get to that point. But I believe we have a plan that's set in front of us that the district can utilize first. And I know that we want desperately for all of the kids to be in school all of the time, but we might just be at a stage where that is not possible. I mean, it's not possible right now, otherwise they'd be there. And there are also examples of cities and communities across the globe, literally, that are prioritizing education over some other entities. I'm not saying that we are saying close down stores, close down restaurants, close down bars, that kind of a thing, but there are some examples around that shows us where schools and the education of our kids is being put at the top, and other businesses are scaling back to a certain extent, whether it's closing early or making some shifts. So I would say that's something for our community to consider and really look at what is the value of education for our kids if we want our kids to be in school. And if we're saying that's a safe place for them to be, not only for learning, but for everything else that our schools provide our children, what other kinds of sacrifices are we willing to make in our community? Dr. Gandhi.
I think we've said from the onset that this is really debating a set of risks and a set of harms with the benefits of in-person instruction. We know that. I think I want to start by saying whatever's happening in the distance learning environment, I do fundamentally believe in that and the work that our staff put forth. It's not meant to replicate or duplicate in-person instruction. It's supposed to be distance learning in the environment of distance learning, and I think our staff do a great job of doing that. With that being said, I think everyone wants to come back to in-person, but this conversation and the challenge that we're having it's not unique to us. If you look at this at the national scale right now, and you even just look at the largest school districts across the nation, you have Boston Public Schools doing one thing, you have LA Unified that's been supposed to come back second semester, you have Houston that came back, and then 16 days later, half of their schools are in person, the other half aren't. Then you have the New York Department of Education that has 1 million students that are doing something else. This is the same conversation happening in every school district across the USA, large or small. You centralize that to our state. I can assure you that every single day I'm in touch with the superintendents in Bismarck, Grand Forks, in West Fargo, and Moorhead. Everyone's having these same conversations. Even if you look at the paper around Jamestown and what was reported to yesterday, the same level of conversation that we're having. So I think, it's interesting. One of the committees, everything is a juxtaposition, right? You have to weigh several factors on how you make your decision. When we started in August, we were weighing what we didn't know and potential risk strategies with the benefits of education. That has shifted now. Now because we know that our schools are safe. So now what we have to weigh is knowing that schools can be a safer environment for our students and staff and provide in-person instruction, which is the goal. is that worth, how do you weigh that versus the fact that you might have significant staff shortages? Staff shortages will lead, and I can almost guarantee that it will lead at some point to classrooms or buildings going to distance learning. But do you do it systemically because you have so many staff shortages, or do you continue with the path that you've created, trying to get to in-person instruction because you know that's safer, and then just do it on a rolling basis as needed with the schools, or with the classroom, or with that building? That's what that committee now has to decide. That's a juxtaposition and that's all just based on the data that we know right now. Because we're meeting with Fargo Cass Public Health again on Friday, and they can say, hey, in the last 2 weeks, we've learned that you are starting to spread in your schools, which would change this conversation 100%. So that's kind of what we have to deal with. And I think the committee has decided at this point, let's continue with our plan, but know that we might have classrooms or buildings that on a dime have to flip to distance learning. And I'm incredibly proud of our staff because they have the ability to do that. I don't know if necessarily switching to distance learning is going to be safer for all of our staff and our students, but if that's the guidance if we get the guidance from Fargo Cass Public Health, absolutely, that would be my recommendation. So I think those are the things that we have to consider.
Robin?
Now, we can go back and forth on this all night and dispute the merits of whatever action, but one piece that I really feel we need to mention is our teachers cannot sustain this level of unknown for an extended amount of time. Everybody in this community and in the world are working extra hard, and I also listen into the COVID conversations, or the committee, because I'm an alternate. The sustainability of the efforts of our staff are concerning, and if they're working that hard, they're going to be that much more tired, and they're going to be that much more likely to get sick. So I just don't want us to forget that in this conversation as well. There's a human element to everything that we do, and it's one thing about following the data, but we also have to acknowledge we need to take care of our staff. And yes, our kids need to be back in school. I've said that from the beginning, but they can't be back in school if we don't have healthy staff.
All right, thank you. We have had a great discussion, and I think this is a reason why we need to have an item specifically regarding COVID-19 on our agenda so that we can have this kind of a discussion. Dr. Gandhi, is there something that you would like to include for your superintendent's report?
Reach out to Fargo Public Schools if you're interested in a substitute teaching position or how that works. But no, I think we've talked about COVID, and I know we're adding another business item today, so thank you, and I'll explain that when we do, for allowing that on the board agenda, but that's it for my time.
All right, it's 7 o'clock. Would you like to take a break for about 10 minutes? Yes, I see some people saying yes. Are we okay to stay? Okay, we'll keep plowing through. If we need to take a break after a little bit, we will. Let's get on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion for approval? Robin?
I move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
There's a second by, a motion by Brian, second by by Brian. Thank you so much. All in favor signify by saying yes.
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 Opposed? Same sign, motion passes on the consent agenda. On to business superintendent evaluation. You will see the memo 63 from me, from the governance committee. We received the evaluation. The recommendation is that this evaluation be accepted and filed, and that a majority of the board members rated the superintendent's performance as satisfactory on a scale with two choices, satisfactory or unsatisfactory. Is there a motion for approval? Robin?
I move that this evaluation of the superintendent be accepted and filed.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I would second that motion.
Okay, by Brian, a second. Any discussion? Any discussion? Okay. Anne Marie, I guess you call the roll on this one.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Robin Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
President Knutson.
Yes, motion passes. Item B is HVAC ionization units, memo 64, and it was pointed out to me that the memo at our microphones here is a little bit different. I include some additional information than what was sent out to us, so this is the memo we need to refer to, and this was added to the agenda after the initial agenda was published Friday. Dr. Gandhi contacted me and explained that there was the necessity to include this, so that's why it looks different on our agenda today than Friday. So Dr. Gandhi, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Board President. The memo you have in front of you is to declare an emergency situation so we can forego the bid process for the two items that you see on the board memo, which are the needlepoint air ionizers and the UV domestic water meters. These are things that we want to be able to provide a more healthier environment in our schools. I want to be very cautious and make sure that I say that these aren't mitigation strategies that are going to prevent COVID-19. What they are going to do is provide a healthier environment in terms of air quality and water quality for our students. These are going to be funded using the corpse dollars that are available to us. In front of you, you should have K-12 COVID resiliency grant guidance. This would fall under the 5th bullet, which says physical environmental improvements such as ventilation systems. So that's how we would be using these dollars under that allowable dollars guidance. And then the paragraph right after that that says, in addition to the approval of the resiliency grants dollars, this applies to corpse dollars. We're using the corpse dollars for this. The corpse dollars are limited to the bullets that are listed right there for allowable uses. And as of now, the contracted services have to be encumbered by December 31st. The North Dakota Century Code bid process takes multiple weeks to post, advertise, go through the bid process, which would not allow us to meet that December 31st deadline. So at the risk of not losing those dollars, we are asking that the board declare this one of those times where we can call this an emergency fund. We did check with our legal attorney, and our legal attorney said that this should be allowed under the emergency provision in North Dakota Century Code, as long as the school board says yes. We do agree with that as well. So that's what we're asking to happen here.
Brian.
I'd like to make a motion to declare an emergency situation under NDCC 48-01.2 related to the pandemic and allow administration to proceed with installing HVAC ionization units, UV water filtration meters without seeking public improvement bids.
Second.
All right, there's been a motion by Brian and a second by Robin. Is there any discussion? Jennifer, and then David.
Clarifying question, does the amount received in the CARES or corpse dollars cover this entire amount?
Yes, so you said CARES, so we have,
CARES
as it relates to coded, this, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, plus some. So we will, yes, there's none of this is going to be coming from the non-COVID supplied dollars.
Sorry, and maybe I should clarify, the corpse dollars that you mentioned under the CARES Act.
Correct.
They will 100% cover this cost.
Yes, so we actually have, I think, 4 revenue sources that Jackie's going to talk about. Resiliency grant, gear grant, corpse dollars, and the original CARES dollars that we're able to use, each with different parameters and requirements as a district because of the pandemic. Even after this, we are able to fund other mitigation strategies using that full pot of dollars, such as the N95 mask McKinsey talked about, and some of the other things that we're going to talk about, like the employees that we've hired on fixed terms. But yes, it would cover that, and I'll let Jackie go into detail.
No, we are not able to hear you, Jackie.
Do I need to do something? Is it working now? There we go. Hard to hear a little bit. Just to clarify, so, with the different pots of money that we have, we're going to spend the corpse funding first, because that was what was received and expires December 30th. We also received the resiliency funds in about the same amount, and those also expire December 30th at this point. So we've spent some of the corpse dollars. I can't, without knowing exactly where we're at, I can't say that 100% of this is corpse. Some of it may roll over into the resiliency. And then we're saving our initial pot of money that we received for ESSER, as that extends for another year and a half yet. So I hope that helps clarify a little bit.
David, did you have a question also?
Yeah, I did. I have absolutely no problem with spending the money to put this in. I think it's valuable, even to have this in our schools, even without the threat of COVID. I'm just kind of uncomfortable. Now, you mentioned Schwab as a local company. There must be other companies that can provide this service besides Schwab. It bothers me that we're not going to put out a project that totals almost $2 million on bids. And I'm questioning why we're waiting so long, so now we're up against the wall. And I understand this money ends on December 30th, but it's been several months ago that we first discussed the value of having these UV filters put in, because I remember asking Tracy. I was well aware of the fact that UV is extremely helpful in controlling bacteria. She pointed out to me that it also is effective in controlling viruses. This was several months ago. I don't know why it's now the November meeting before we're releasing. If we would have put this out on bids a couple of months ago, we would have had plenty of time to receive bids and give any company that was interested an opportunity to do this.
Dr. Gandhi has his hand up.
I'll ask Blake to come to speak to maybe the companies, and because I don't know the companies personally, but he can speak to that. I can speak to the timeline. We did not have these dollars. Actually, what the true timeline is, and I might be a little bit off, but I think it was just about a month and a half ago that we were notified of the corpse dollars. And at that time, corpse was only limited to staffing, and it was going to be used by December 31st. And I think we even talked about that at one of the board meetings when it was first announced. And that stayed in that guidance for about a month. And then we were just notified a couple weeks ago about the resiliency grant. And that's when this document came out. And that's when the resiliency grant said, well, now retroactively, you can use your corpse dollars for these 6 things. So really, we haven't had the time because we were just notified of these funds and what we could use them from DPI within the last couple of weeks.
Blake?
To answer your question about why we're looking at Schwab, what it comes down to is good working history with them, and it does come down to the fact of being able to get the products in time to be able to get them installed by the deadline. Now, that being said, that's just the material, okay? If you're looking at vendors for who's going to do the installation, we're looking at between 5 to 8 vendors as well. So that'd be different vendors throughout the Fargo Moorhead area that would be installing these for us as well. So, but that's why we're looking at Schwab.
David, and then Rob.
And I want to, an apology or whatever. If this were only made available to you 2 weeks ago, then the fact that we were made aware of UV filters 2 months ago really has no bearing on this discussion, and I can see the urgency.
Robin, did you still have a comment?
Oh, well, thank you for mentioning that. These grants are so prescriptive, and they have such a short timeline for turnaround. You have to write the check prior to the deadline. And I have had many projects, millions of dollars worth of projects and grants that we have not been able to bid out, which are completely against our policies. But if we don't use it, we're going to lose it. I would be surprised. It's very enlightening for me that they are going to let you add stuff into the ERG, because that is not the case for regular business holders. So I think we need to give this administration some grace on how they handle these grants, because they are turning just like our COVID information is on an almost daily basis. So thank you for your flexibility, because it's a lot of work to go out and tour those buildings and get the bids, and just to even figure out the scope of work. But I think it will be good for our schools, as David said, whether we're in COVID or not.
Any other discussion? Tracy?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to add a few points. I've been back and forth about this today. I even had a conversation with Blake, so thank you for your time on that. I just want to add to this conversation that there is not a lot of data around the efficacy or safety of some of these things. So that gave me a little bit of pause today. When you look at the CDC return to school guidelines and the American Academy of Pediatrics, which I tend to follow, they deem these as alternative disinfection methods. And they point out that the EPA does not routinely review the safety or efficacy of these things, so we really don't have data particular to COVID and the mitigation of SARS-CoV-2. However, thank you for everything that's been said here tonight, because there is a deadline on this, using this money by December 30th, 31st. And I think that these are good strategies to use in our school for the regular safety of clean air and water, as far as like regular bacteria and viruses, like you were saying, David. But I just want to be very clear that we aren't misrepresenting to the public that this is a COVID-19 mitigation strategy, because I can't in good faith say that. But I think it is a good thing to do, and it is the standard now of all new buildings. I think that West Fargo approved some funding for very similar things last night, and I know that NDSU has implemented similar things with UV lights, but there is no solid information on specifically this virus. So.
Thank you, Tracy. Rupak?
Yeah, absolutely agree with Dr. Newman, which is kind of why we provided this, because we wanted to make sure that it fell under the physical environment improvements. I just checked my email. We did receive the notice for this grant, which allowed us to use corpse dollars, because corpse dollars was limited, on October 28th. So that's when we were actually notified of both this document and the ability to use a resiliency grant. And then as for the benefits, again, Dr. Newman talked about it. We don't know if this is a mitigation strategy for COVID-19. This is to provide, improve the physical environment, to provide cleaner air and cleaner water. And then I believe what Anne Marie said is that we probably have done some of this work at our central office, or our south office at the Nutrition Services Kitchen as well.
Yes, our nutrition services, we actually installed, at the operations center and our distribution area and in nutrition services, we installed the UV lighting. UV lighting we turn on at a certain time at night when people aren't around in the building. That does help disinfect large areas, surfaces, cans of canned goods, all sorts of different things over there that we like to disinfect. I believe it's helped and improved the overall building health and the quality over there, having those items installed.
Brian?
It's important to mention that Dr. Gandhi is working with the officials that give these grants out in Bismarck, and so he's done a lot of work here behind the scenes in order for the officials that are handing these grants out to change in mid-course, and so he's not sharing that information with you. So we appreciate all of the work and advocate that you've done for not only Fargo Public Schools, but all the schools in the state. So thank you.
Jennifer?
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to those who asked, some difficult questions around this, because it is actually a big ask of the board to accept allowing this to happen without public bid process. So I can't say that ask has come in front of us before, and I think that this dialogue, it's good that it gave us pause and that we asked tough questions, and that I don't see it as doubting anyone's intent or questions that have or have not been asked. I see it as an opportunity for us as board members to understand the information fully before we vote on it, so we can feel confident in our vote to support. So thank you, and I too will plan to support.
Thank you, Jennifer. Rupak?
I wholeheartedly agree. So I don't think we ever view this as doubting. This is the conversation we want and expect at the board level, just for the emergency provision, but then also we all have a fiduciary responsibility to our taxpayer dollars, and we want to make sure that we're making the best use of it. This is why this afternoon we were looking at the research around this and making sure that we were staying true to the intent of the grant and making sure we went back to the document. So this is the conversation we appreciate and want to have at the board level.
All right, I think that we are ready to vote. Anne Marie?
Robin Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
President Knutson.
Yes, motion passes. Item C was included here in case we needed to have an executive session, but I understand that that is not necessary, correct? All right, we'll move on to board reports then. Seth, how about if you go ahead?
Not too much. On the 5th, I had my first negotiations meeting because I couldn't skip it like I did the first one, David. And and then yesterday we had a planning committee meeting, and that's about it.
All right, Seth, thank you. Nikki?
Yes, we did have a negotiations planning meeting, and I didn't put that down. So, yes, we did. October 26th through the 30th, of course, we had mentioned prior, the North Dakota School Board Association Law Seminar took place that week. October 30th was also the Delegate Assembly. November 5th, I sat in on a call with Superintendent Basler for a statewide discussion with school boards. And yes, the negotiations meeting. And then as far as communications, advocacy, and engagement goes, we haven't met since my last report. However, we do have a meeting upcoming November 23rd.
Thank you, Nikki. Jennifer?
Thank you. That's 7:30, right, Nikki? Perfect. I just want to make sure I have it right here. Okay, since we last met, we have had 1 or 2 planning meetings, I think. Something like that. And boy, time flies. And the North Dakota Law Seminar I have on my list as well. So that's it.
All right, Jennifer, David?
Nothing. They've covered everything. We've had negotiations and planning. I think, I'm looking at the calendar reminders that Anne Marie provided with us. I believe that on November 19th, we piggybacked a negotiations committee meeting following governance because there are so many members that overlap. So I had down, at least in my calendar, that we had the governance committee meeting at 7:30 and a negotiations committee meeting immediately following. Yeah, am I right?
Anne Marie, do you have that information?
I don't support negotiations, so I'm not sure exactly at this very moment.
I think that, yeah, it would be Jolynn. So, but if that's the information you have, David, and that'll come out from Jolynn, but we can add that on here to the 19th at approximately 8:30 a.m. that it sounds like there's a negotiations committee meeting. Anything else, David? Okay, thank you. Robin?
I'll start with the events and close with GAC, since it's been a big week in elections. So the last week of October, the NDSBA law seminars, I thought they were very helpful. Learned a lot, good refreshers. On October 29th, the North Dakota Return to Learn Town Hall, which is typically put on by the doctors that were included in Basler's call that you referenced, Nikki. And I also that night got to be, as I mentioned to the school board members, I got to be the elected official for Girl Scouts earning their badge. So those are really fun. If you ever get an invite, I encourage you to partake in those. It's a big deal for the girls to hear elected officials, and there were some great questions. October 30th was the NDSBA Delegate Assembly. The next week on November 12th, the Instructional Plan Committee. As an alternate, I sit through on that. I don't get to participate, but I really thank all the people that are doing all the work there. It's important work. The next day, on November 3rd, the new police chief asked to meet with me, and he's a big supporter of SROs, so we'll have a lot of partnerships with our new police chief as well. I'm trouble with my dates here. November 5th was Baszler statewide call with the North Dakota Return to Learn team. Nikki mentioned that. On November 19th was a governance committee. The November Community Development Committee has been canceled. A lot of the city is moving back to Zoom calls and what have you, but that has been canceled. Back to GAC, Governmental Affairs Committee. Updates from the election. Clearly, we had some great voter turnout. The bent within the Senate and the House is very overwhelmingly controlled by Republicans. From a national perspective, we know we are watching that unfold as well. The presumed president-elect Biden has some great plans that he is presenting. I would expect that we will have a new Secretary of Education. He's also proposed tripling the federal Title I program dollars for low-income schools, concerned about making sure that public dollars go to public schools. Let's see here. He opposes voucher programs. Try not to get too political here. And then he gets into the higher ed stuff. But I would say on the flip side of that, we are still controlled by a Republican Senate and House, so those are great plans, but there's going to be some battles there at the national level. But going to try to keep up to date on those. RUPOC sends me some updates as well, so hang tight, guys. The ride is not over, but as I am committed to, as been several years, I will fight for public education till the end. On November 17th, we will have our virtual legislator, what used to be a breakfast, but it's going to be an update for Zoom. There will be some invites sent out to our legislators. It will be a public meeting, and board members will be able to participate. Jolynn sent out an advance packet today that includes I gave everybody save the dates. She sent out a list of district contacts on cardstock for our legislators, the fast facts, and then our legislative priority booklet. We did refine that, and I think we've got it finalized for the session. Sorry to take so much time here, but Jolynn has worked really hard, and Jackie on this, so it deserves some discussion. But basically, our top priorities for this legislative session at the state level are behavioral health and education funding, and we can get down into the details of those as we proceed. And I believe, I can't even remember when the next GAC, we are foregoing the December GAC meeting because of, we're going to gear up in here in January, and then it's going to be a wild ride. But we're good to go. We've got the plan set up, and each of you we have covered every district. Even though we're elected at large, we have 7 districts in Fargo Public Schools, and we have 9 board members, and we have every district represented. So it's really interesting how that falls, because it has ever since I've been on the board. So thank you. I believe that's all.
Thank you, Robin. Brian?
I had a planning meeting led by our chairman, Jim Johnson, a negotiating meeting led by David Paulson, our chairman, and a GAC meeting I attended with Robin Nelson as our chairman. I'd like to thank all 3 of those chairmen. They do excellent work. And I'd like to thank all the other board members as well for all the work you're doing in your committees, because I value that work. I trust that you're doing a great job, and I think you are. And the cabinet as well for providing us all of the materials and stuff to help us do that work. It's really appreciative. It's a good team, and we need each other to make all these important decisions for our kids. So thanks.
Thank you, Brian. My report, I wanted to highlight for anyone too that might be listening in, and then reminders for board members regarding the Woodrow Wilson High School renaming process. There was, of course, a community engagement process for name submissions that began and closed, well, it closed November 8th. Thank you to the community members that were involved in providing us with ideas of names for us to consider through that online process. 214 forms were completed with 129 unique names submitted and suggested to us. So those names we have all now received. There was an email that we received today from Anne Marie. By noon, November 19th, all of us, each of us, are to submit up to 5 names from that list of 129 back to Anne Marie. She will then collate those names in preparation for our November 24th board meeting, where we will rank those names. We will go through an exercise where we will rank those names, and the highest ranking name is the one that will be the new name for that school. If there's a tie, there's a process that we just keep voting until the highest name is elevated. So looking forward to that discussion and just making sure that that's homework for us in addition to the next homework that's due November 19th. The NDSBA Law Seminar and the Delegate Assembly was something I participated in. The Native American Commission met last week, and as Robin said, a lot of the commissions through the city are starting to meet via Zoom, and so we went back to a Zoom meeting after having a few in-person meetings. And earlier today, I sent to all board members, as well as Dr. Gandhi and Tamra, the NDSU land acknowledgement statement that has been finalized. I want that for you to take that for your own information so that you know what is being done in our community to acknowledge the land that our town, our school sits on, our school district sits on. And I have no doubt, it's just my thought, that we might end up moving in that direction ourselves in terms of a school district. In fact, I would encourage the district and maybe the board to even think about taking a look at that statement and having some conversations about how we might look to putting something together for ourselves. So that's just a plug in our ears to keep thinking about. Let's see, our community is getting closer to finalizing the space. This goes back to the Native American Commission. Community is getting closer to finalizing a space downtown. I have not been given the where downtown, but to serve as an Indigenous center. So that's something that is desperately needed in our community. Committee meetings that I have attended, the CEA meeting, Communications, Education, Advocacy, Planning, I listened in on the phone there. Government Relations, thanks Robin for all the work. Thanks all committee chairs for everything that's being done. There's a lot of good work that's being done by the entire board to date. There is an editorial board meeting that is set up that Rupak and I will participate in. I'm not quite sure if that's November 18th or not. I feel like I've seen some maybe communication on if there's a date that isn't working or not. So we just need to finalize that. We don't need to do that now. Also November 5th participated in the session that Superintendent Baszler offered to us. One of the main takeaways that I took from that was the push on masks. There was a really, really serious discussion about masks, and that it is not even up for discussion in terms of if they work or not. And we can disagree about all kinds of other things, but not masks. That was, and I'm paraphrasing the discussion that was there. I believe it too, but that was a very, very strong statement. Let's see, Alexander Bakken from the Office of the State Auditor has been working with our district on the audit, and so he gave me a call. It's just practice that that person contacts the board president to touch base on a few items to see if I have any questions or if there's anything that I really wonder about or any specific concerns that I felt that I needed to raise. I didn't have any, but he did bring up a discussion about a fraud risk assessment that he might be suggesting that we do, so I have some information from him on that, and I'll take a look at that and figure out where we go from there. We have all been reminded that we need to have a new password change every 365 days at the minimum. And, I want to thank the help desk for helping me and for hanging with me on the phone. Okay, Brian too, and me. The person that did work with me, and I'm sorry I don't have his name right now, but he said, I have helped some other board members as well. So, thank you. The article that was on the Woodrow Wilson name change was in the last Journey and School Talk. And I want to thank Tamara for her review of that article before I submitted it. So hopefully that helps educate some members of our community in terms of why that change was decided on by the board, and kind of brings in some of my personal experience that led to my belief that that was something that we really needed to pay attention to. Of course, we have a ton of feedback from our community, and it's great, regarding boundaries, specifically boundaries and COVID-related. And so the next meeting for that instructional plan committee is 6:30 a.m. Monday. And in regard to the boundaries, what I have been trying to do in terms of emailing back constituents is to try to help let constituents know where we are in the process, and that it's with the planning committee right now. I know planning just met, but that those 3 plans that were elevated our last board meeting went back to the planning committee for further discussion and more information that's going to be coming to us, I think, at our next board meeting. So really, when there have been messages that have been come to us that seem like they're ones probably that go to all board members, I have reminded them of that it's at planning, and so if those individuals have sent that information to all 9 board members, that planning committee members have also received that. So that, that at that committee level, everyone that serves on planning can take that information and use that to help make decisions at planning too, that gets forwarded to us. November 18th, there is the Core Neighborhood Steering Committee that I serve on. I will be participating, actually, I guess that's the 17th of November. I think that's a Zoom meeting. I provided the consultant there, and I know Dr. Gandhi, you talked with Peter Lombardi too. He said that your conversation was really valuable, but I provided him with our current elementary, middle, and high school boundaries, the enrollment data on socioeconomics, which is something that he requested, and also our annual report that includes the profiles on all of the core neighborhood, the schools in the neighborhoods that are being addressed in that core neighborhood plan. So that is my report. Brian?
President Knudsen, I don't believe we've heard from Dr. Newman's report yet.
We haven't. She's talked so much earlier because we really engaged with her and wanted her to be speaking. I thought, it was a risk that I started with Seth because I knew I needed to come back. Thank you, Brian. Tracy, is there anything else you would like to add?
Darn you, Brian. I thought I was going to just float on under the radar there.
I know better.
Yeah, it's kind of nice to go last. You guys have said almost all of it. Boy, yeah, I too took part of the NDSBA school law seminars and the NDSBA delegate assembly. That was really cool to do as a first time. I feel like I learned a lot in those. I just wanted to do a plug for Tamara Usselman's equity and inclusion work. I think I said it last time, but I now have completed session 2 of the giant training of her intercultural competency that she's doing. And that's just a really cool leadership work to learn about yourself and others. Of course, we had the instructional plan committee. I was on the call with Superintendent Basler. I was at GAC meeting where I just was really impressed with our booklet of priorities that was put together so quickly, and that we planned our local educators breakfast for November 17th. I called in yesterday to planning committee, and then I just watched the RPS data video and then tried to review the report to the best of my ability. It is a lot of information, but I think it's important. And then I, too, wrote a piece for the Journey and Fargo Public Schools newsletter, and I think that's a really great thing the board is going to start doing to increase our transparency and to increase our voice directly to our families and the public. So I really enjoyed your piece, Rebecca. Thanks for taking the time to do it, but I think it's a thing I look forward to all of us taking part in. Thanks.
Thank you. I knew Tracy was going to be able to close this out much better than I was. But since you did mention those, the Journey and the School Talk news or the columns, I have GAC down for November 19th and Negotiations Committee down for December 17th. So Anne Marie, help us out here. Are those the dates where those articles are due?
Those would be the dates of, they'd be in the newsletter, so they'd be due the Tuesday before. But Amy will loop with the appropriate board member who would be supplying that in advance and make sure they know the date that she's seeking that information.
Sounds good. Thank you. Okay, so we'll look forward to GAC then, November 19th. Dr. Gandhi, did you have your hand up? Are you trying to close this meeting out?
You know, Board President, I do have to close this out the right way, just because tomorrow is a no-school holiday in honor of Veterans Day, and just we have so many staff members that have served our country and so many members of our community as well. So I just want to close this out by expressing my gratitude to all of the veterans. I know that even during the most challenging times, we are privileged with the liberties that we have to be able to even have some of the conversations that we do and to engage in some of the things that we can. So just wanted to acknowledge that and close this out that way.
Thank you. And our next meeting is the Jennifer.
Sorry, I really tried to get your attention so that
I'm
could
sorry,
be the
you need to-
end, because that would have been the better end. In looking at this, I have two clarifying questions on a meeting date. I'm so sorry, and I just want to make sure it is out there. So, Robin, did you say there is not going to be a GAC in December, correct? And then,
Correct.
Okay, and then also this document has planning on the 27th. However, we changed that last meeting, so it is going to be the 4th. Is that what you said, Seth?
Good
Yes,
catch.
4th, at 7:30 in the morning.
That is correct. Good catch.
Nothing on the 27th, correct.
Okay, thank you. That's
Yes.
important. All right, so our next meeting is November 24th here at the Fargo South Theater at 5:30, and I think it's 7:40, and we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.